Alright, so obviously I'm excited to play games like Mario Kart World, or Donkey Kong Bonanza, or Metroid Prime 4 whenever it comes out later this year for the Switch 2. However, I'm almost as excited for, if not maybe slightly more so, to dive into a bunch of Switch 1 games once I finally get my grubby little mitts on the Switch 2 this June. So that's what today's video is all about, is I just want to talk a little bit about some of the games that I'm excited to play from my Switch 1 library, whether those are games that I've either entirely neglected and not even opened in some cases, some that I've opened but barely made any progress on, and then some are just really old classic favorites that I'm excited to return to, and see if they're given any sort of new life once I fire it up on the larger screen and beefed up internals of the Switch 2, even if some of those games don't necessarily get a performance patch. So for now I'm going to go ahead and go over the top 5 games that I'm most excited to play from my original Switch library, and then I'll also throw in a few honorable mentions because honestly my backlog is pretty heinous across every platform, but I do have a lot of physical Switch games to chew through. So all that being said, let's go ahead and kick this off with the game that I'm first most excited to play because I got a pretty good deal on it a while back and I have not even opened it yet, and that would be The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. And I think one of the reasons I'm most excited to finally jump into this one, albeit not until the Switch 2 arrives, is I did play all the way through the Link's Awakening remake a few years back, and I know some people were kind of hit or miss on it in terms of visuals, but I really love that art style. There's just something about that tilt-shift camera look that gives everything a dreamy aesthetic, and it makes all of the different characters shown on screen kind of look very toy-like, and I think considering this is a series that really does have its roots in the top-down look anyways, that this was just a natural evolution of what was already there, and done in just a brilliant way that was just visually very pleasing. Not to mention, again, I have not even opened this game yet, so I have zero familiarity with what to expect, and I've only really seen a little bit of trailer footage about it, but also there is the sheer novelty of the fact that you do finally get to play as Zelda, because to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a game where you've gotten to play as Zelda before, maybe outside of Hyrule Warriors, because I think you could play as Zelda in that, if I'm remembering correctly. But the biggest reason that I'm excited to check this out on the Switch 2 in particular, is it is one of the dozen or so games that Nintendo has already confirmed on their site that will get a performance patch day one when it comes out. And again, because I haven't played it yet, I don't really have a great frame of reference for how well it did or didn't perform on the Switch, but now I kind of know that I'm going to get the best possible experience considering there is going to be that day one performance patch. Which is actually a pretty good way to segue to the next game that I'm excited to play on the Switch, and this is a Zelda that will not be getting a free performance patch on day one, although it will definitely be getting a performance patch that brings it up to the Switch 2 edition, and that will be The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. And I know it may not be exactly thrilling to front-load this list with not one, but two different Zelda entries, but I did really want to talk about Tears of the Kingdom specifically. Because for whatever reason, Tears of the Kingdom came out, I picked up a copy, I played it for a couple of hours, and I just stopped playing it. And I don't think it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. For some reason the mechanics and everything that it was doing just felt a little bit more complex than what I was used to, and while I know it was supposed to build on everything that made Breath of the Wild great, it just didn't resonate with me for some reason. And I don't think that was necessarily chalked up to a 30 FPS performance, but rather there was just something overwhelming about it, but not in like a fun, adventurous way, just kind of like a little bit too much for that particular moment way. Which is odd, because when it comes to Breath of the Wild, when that first launched with the original Nintendo Switch, I tore through that game and dropped 100 hours in it like it was nothing, had an amazing time with it, and also I should point out that game is also going to get a patch that you have to pay for through either Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pack, or you could just buy The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Switch 2 edition. But again, because I basically completely neglected Tears of the Kingdom shortly after it first came out, I'm really hoping that the Switch 2 and its performance upgrades will make it somewhat more appealing, and I'm going to try to give it a real shot this time to see if it resonates with me in any more significant way, because just like I enjoyed playing Breath of the Wild out of the gate on the Switch, it just seems like playing a big, beefy Zelda game is a natural fit for the launch of a new Nintendo console, and I'm so glad that they decided to do an expansion pack for this that would improve performance. Because at the very least, I figure even if I get deeper into Tears of the Kingdom and it still isn't quite grabbed me, at the very least it's going to be a beautiful, cozy world to get lost in, and that was one of my favorite parts of the original Breath of the Wild experience. But enough about Zelda, next up let's get a little bit more futuristic with Metroid Prime Remastered. And this one too is a game that I've barely touched. I picked up the physical as soon as it was available because I knew I wanted a way to play this game in the modern age, and honestly back in the day when it came to the GameCube, I did play this game and I enjoyed it, but I don't think I ever really finished it. And considering the other day, it was just hilarious to me that I went back and finally finished Ocarina of Time on 3DS after just stepping away from it for 12 years, I figured why not make it even more hilarious and go back like 23, 24 years to when Metroid Prime first came out, and finally start filling in my gaps in that particular series. And what better way to do that than on the Switch 2? I don't think there's going to be a performance patch for Metroid Prime Remastered, at least not that I've seen so far, but I still have to assume that just natively because of those beefed up internals that it will at least run a little bit better than it did on the original Switch, which, by all accounts, it does not run terribly there, but I have to imagine it'd be at least a little better on the Switch 2, or maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part. And it's nothing against 3D Metroids, I've just always felt more at home with 2D Metroids, and so far I've only beaten Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid Fusion, Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS, although I played it on the 2DS XL, and then most recently Metroid Dread. Sadly, and perhaps ashamedly, I have not beaten Super Metroid, but it is on my to-do list. And considering Metroid Prime 4 is going to be one of the biggest launches of the Switch 2 no doubt this year, and I'm secretly hoping that they will do remasters of Metroid Prime 2 and 3, although I don't know if it's realistic to hope for that before 4 comes out, I at least want to make sure that I have the original Metroid Prime taken care of, so I at least have some familiarity with that series and where it's going to go, even if I don't have time to beat 2 and 3 before 4 finally drops. But now let's chill things out a bit with a game that I could have sworn was in my collection, and I was shocked when I started looking through my games that I did not have this game, so I'll have to pick it up before the Switch 2 comes out, and that would be Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. And the thing is, I did already beat this game originally on the Wii U, but I haven't spent any time checking out Bowser's Fury or really know the full depth of what that expansion even looks like. And just like The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, this too is getting a free performance patch upgrade for Switch 2 on launch day. And the appeal here for me really is twofold. One, it's just incredibly fun to play a Mario game with the launch of new Nintendo hardware. And I'm not going to say that he's an icon. For me, Mario is like the gaming icon. I mean, sure, there are arguments you could make for other characters in gaming, like Pac-Man or Sonic the Hedgehog, but he just happens to be my personal gaming icon because he was there when I first played my very first system that was my own, and that would be my NES when I was about 5 years old, and I still have fond memories of my mom playing Mario Brothers on my NES in my room and forcing me to go to bed early so she could stay up late and play it. Mom, if you're watching, I definitely forgive you, but now you have your own Mario. Or you can just borrow mine whenever you get your Switch. Either one. And the other reason I'm really excited to play this one on the Switch 2 is that Mario games just naturally lend themselves very well to the portable format. And that's because almost all of the mainline entries for Mario games tend to have a world/stage structure, which makes it really easy to jump in, make a few progress by beating a level or two, and then jumping back out if you need to. So yeah, even though I haven't revisited this game in about 12 years, since then I have enjoyed going back and emulating Super Mario 3D Land for the 3DS on the Steam Deck. That's a video that I'll probably end up making later, but for now, suffice it to say that I was a big fan of what they did with this sort of 2.5D approach to Mario, and I can't wait to get even more of it, albeit in a slightly better performing way, on the Switch 2 when it comes out. And while I'm sure I'll appreciate the increased performance, the raw performance isn't really the reason I want to play this, rather it's just for that warm, cozy nostalgia hit that only Mario can provide. And finally, speaking of cozy games, it's hard to beat everybody's favorite pink floofball, Kirby, and I am definitely looking forward to playing Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And honestly, I've been on kind of a big Kirby kick lately anyways. Like a few weeks back, I beat Kirby Triple Deluxe, and I moved on to Kirby's Dream Land on the Switch, and now I'm actually going to try and play Kirby's Adventure, I think, for NES, although I might play the remake on the Game Boy Advance, although the name eludes me right now. I may just emulate that, though, because if I wanted to find a physical cart for it, I think those are pretty expensive at this point. And while generally speaking, I'm trying to go through all of the Kirby games in release order right now after kind of getting hooked by Kirby Triple Deluxe, I'm okay hopping around a little bit, specifically so I can finally check out Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, since that's just been rotting on my backlog. And this is another game that's getting sort of an expansion pack, although it's not a free one. You have to actually pay, I think, $20 to get this, because it takes from just being Kirby and the Forgotten Lands to Kirby and the Forgotten Lands plus Star-Crossed Road, I think is the name of it. Although admittedly I was a little bummed that that wasn't a free upgrade like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Well, I use the term free loosely, they're free if you get the expansion pack online, but you know what I mean. But honestly, that's my own fault for expecting that, because I just didn't pay close enough attention during the Nintendo Direct, so yeah, not a huge deal. I think $20 is probably a fair price for the extra things that they're adding to it. And even though I'm still not real clear on how the Star-Crossed Road piece is going to work, whether you have to play through the main game first to unlock it, or if it's available from the jump, I'm still excited to just explore a Kirby game in 3D anyways, especially considering this is supposed to be one of the best Kirby 3D efforts, and I don't think he's had a 3D outing since the N64, maybe? I can't remember now, but yeah, clearly that's why I need to go back through all the Kirby games. So yeah, those are my top 5 original Switch games that I'm excited to check out on the Switch 2. And again, I realize that's a pretty vanilla list, right? 2 Zeldas, a Kirby, a Mario, and a Metroid game. But I did have some honorable mentions that I wanted to throw out there, which are games that are also riding on my backlog that hopefully I can breathe new life into by playing them on the Switch 2. And that would include games like the Xenoblade Chronicles titles, which I've barely touched. Also Astral Chain, which I started, really loved, and has an amazing soundtrack and visuals, and for some reason it just got away from me and continues to ride on my backlog. The Deadly Premonition games, which I realize you can play in other places, but it's probably the most convenient way for me to play it just on the Switch since I do have physical copies of both of those. And there's probably a ton of other Switch games that I'm forgetting to mention right now because I know that I have not in any way put a dent in the collection of Switch games that I have, but hey, here's hoping that the Switch 2 will entice me to do exactly that. But hey, what about you? If you're getting a Switch 2 at launch, are there any original Switch games that you're particularly pumped to check out? If so, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. As far as what's coming up on the channel, I'm also working on a video about the Switch 2 features that I'm most excited to explore. And then finally, probably some Switch 2 accessories that I'll end up ordering from Amazon to see if I can do a review for some of those, since some of the cases on Amazon are just way cheaper than the official offerings and often seem to have more features, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But that's it for this one. As always, thank you so much for your time and watching videos here. It really means a lot to me. Have an amazing day, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.